Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Crown Zenith, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, we are going to be analysing the most recent late night results. This is for tournaments number 71 and 72. These tournaments are really important actually because there's a lot of reason to be participating in these specific late night events. It's really a fantastic thing that the Shuffle Squad and the late night events crew have put together. They are going to have a handful of tournaments, actually 44 events here, running up in the next few months, every Tuesday, and these events will accumulate in an invitational tournament for the top 64 ranked players after totting up all the results between the tournaments starting from this week's up until that tournament 114. And every Tuesday there are actually two flights based on time zones. So the earlier late night event, I guess you could say, is catered towards the European time zone, whereas the second late night is catered more towards our friends across the pond. So it gives everyone a pretty fair chance to play a good amount of Pokemon. I don't think there's much stopping you from playing both late nights. I don't know if they start one after another, just set in stone, but I guess in theory if you start doing badly in the first one you could just drop and then join the second one to give yourself a second chance to place highly. I don't think there's anything against that, and there's no limit on how many of these events you can participate in, but in theory it's raising the stakes, and the winner of the Invitational will get a trip to Japan, and there's more prizing being constructed. I think it's going down to top 16 of that tournament, so seems like it's going to be a fantastic online event with really, really high stakes, which is going to be really interesting to watch. And yes, I do mean watch, because the Shuffle Squad's YouTube channel, even in these just regular tournaments every Tuesday, are going to be streaming the top 8 gameplay for both EU and NA, and it looks like they're looking at doing profiles for the winning decks each week. So a lot of content around this on the Shuffle Squad YouTube channel. I think they already have a podcast where they go into detail about the Invitational and how the structure is changing for these online events, so definitely check out the channel and see how it's all working. But yeah, having commentated gameplay for online events is awesome to see, and they're really pulling out all the stops to try and make this seem like a prestigious and like the most important event that you can be playing online. And of course the glamorous trip to Japan is a great thing to cover and chase. So today we are going to be looking at those results, and I hope weekly I'm going to be doing these tournament results as well, because it seems like these are going to be the flagship events. They have been for a good amount of time, just in terms of the amount of raw numbers people are joining on the late night, but it seems like there's more reason than ever to be playing in these online events. So let's break down the top 8. Unsurprisingly, it's a Lugia Fiesta as we go into the late night 71, which is the EU flights, loosely based. You will still see flags from other countries, but in general it's catering more easily to Europeans. But it was actually won overall by a Rayquaza Lost Box, and there's a pretty spicy Zacian V-Star to look at as well. So let's look at the winning list. Like I said, the Shuffle Squad has a sort of more in-depth deck review here, but this seems to be a pretty straightforward Rayquaza. It is incorporating a Raikou V, just to make life a little bit easier for you to get some 2-for-2 trades with the Lightning Rondo, and you gain some fleet-footed cards here and there for a little bit of additional value. It's actually added in Capture Energies, which is something you don't often see within the list, so it's playing 3 Quick Ball and 2 Capture, so that should give you really good access to your Pokemon in the early game, just getting you Guru developed to protect against Marnie, or Radiant Greninja just to get cycling through the deck, and Manaphy, so really committing a lot of space to the double captures, which is a really interesting take, not something we've seen too much of. Quite low on the switch counts to make room for all this, but overall looking like a pretty solid list. I don't think there's much missing in the Pokemon department. Sometimes you see Zigzagoon, but in this case, not in this 60. But yeah, Rayquaza is still very strong as a Lost Box. Not too many things looking out of place. So strap yourselves in for lots of Lugias to analyze. This is going to be a Flying Peak Lugia. Really interesting to see that Concoction is also playing a Raikou as the only one prize attacking threat. Really interesting that Raikou is typically considered to be like a good card against the one prize stuff. So having Flying Peak already in the list sounds quite strange because you're also having a spread attacker. So that's a bit of an interesting one. Not leaning into Parasol, so still a little bit vulnerable, I suppose, to Lost Box that can just sort of sacrifice Sableye over and over again into you to deal with the Flying Peak. So maybe that's a reason why it needs to have Raikou to sort of like try and continually catch up and be frustrating. Roxanne in Lugia is not something you see too often either, and actually Path of the Peaks in the deck list, so it's been a while since we've experimented with Lugia Path as a combo, but I suppose this is trying to help out against Mew as well as possibly the mirror match if you go second, so definitely an interesting deck list to take a look at. I wonder if we'll see more standard ones as we continue onward. Yeah, this is more of what I was expecting from a Lugia. This looks to be, I think this is just the same list that we saw from the main US like contingent littering the top 8 of the last regional. This looks card for card the same list, and you can't question that. It's done very well, and it's continuing to do well here in the hands of Alex Hamilton. We have more Lugia on display. This is quite a thick Lugia line and is incorporating the Irida. Still playing 2 vacuums though. Typically you use Irida to try and be this like space cheat, but no, still playing the double vacuum. And is playing a Roxanne as well. So Roxanne sneaking into Lugia's. It's actually a really good mirror card, so it wouldn't surprise me if we saw a little bit more of Roxanne. Because you have so much access to the fish that it can be a way that you can sneak games, which is pretty cool to see. Outside of that, now we see an Echoing Horn. That was also pretty popular in the most recent regional, and this is the Irida package once again, now with 3 one-of item cards, which makes a little bit more sense for me to make the most of that value, and also incorporating Birdkeeper, so a little bit of a nod to control and paralysis plays, so it's trying to cover both bases here. Looks pretty reasonable overall. Isn't really sacrificing too much in the deck list, just that thin Lugia line is always that thing that you have to bear in mind. It has been in vogue recently, and it doesn't seem to punish too many players, but it always has that, those percentages are always sort of hidden things where it can all go wrong. Again, this looks very similar to some lists we've seen previously. Nothing wrong with that, it's just you guys have probably seen it already a million times. Now this is something you don't see very often, the Zacian V-Star with Zamazenta 1-1 line in here as well, with that V-Star package. Very spicy, very interesting to see. I've played a decent amount of this deck actually, just for like a last ride with Zacian basically, and it's amazing to see it go this far. Now, I actually have looked at their tournament run, and they didn't face a single loss box, so that's kind of maybe giving you an indication how this deck got so far. On any given day, you can just hit the right matchup, so I'm sure that was a contributing factor. This deck is going to be far stronger into 2-prize matchups than single-prize matchups, even with the Zamazenta's V-Star power that you could use, I suppose, in those instances. So yeah, I don't foresee this really happening too often. But fair play to them, they had a really good run with a spicy deck, and then we're rounding out again with a pretty straightforward Lugia that's playing the Bird Keeps over the Irida and just going down to the 1 choice belt. But yeah, let's have a quick look at the metagame. As you'd expect, a lot of Lugia, 30% of the meta share with Lost Box and Mew. If you combine the Lost Box, that's over 20% as well, so Lost Box seems to be super popular just behind the Lugia, and then Mew is quite a big drop-off. Then we have things like Gudra and Arc and Reggie's, all sort of vying for contention in here as well. It's really what you've come to see and come to know about the format, so nothing too surprising there. As we jump to the next late night, and this is what I want to see. I want to see some top IRL players having a reason to participate in these online tournaments, because Bradner just turns up, wins the tournament. It's no surprise really, he's such a phenomenal player, and is playing a list that they know inside and out, of course, so more Lugia domination in the top 8. This is a slightly more varied top 8 though, just 3 Lugias, and there are some other things going on here. We have an Arc Peak in 2nd place, and it's actually an Arc Peak Vulpix, which is quite an interesting combination. I've been thinking about Vulpix recently, actually, because of Gudra, which is really weird to say. But yeah, Snow Mirage is actually quite annoying for the goo. And you actually have a really good time into Mew as well when you have Drapion and Alolan Vulpix's V-Star power. You just forego using Starbirth if you can, and then you just have two like delete button attacks, which is pretty promising. So the Vulpix is one of these cards that I thought it like ticked just enough boxes that it could see a bit of play here and there. I'm still like not entirely convinced by it, but it can create more awkward scenarios for certain players. Especially with the Flying Peak and you're already playing Parasols, you can be this annoying wall in random situations. So it's not utterly surprising to see it come together, but you know, we haven't seen a lot of it previously. This is playing Piers, which is pretty interesting. Not something you often associate with Arc builds, but it's extra access to Crobat and Drapion, as well as some of your special energy. V-Guard seems to be a real important include for them by the looks of things, where you're trying to tank out with your Guardy V-Guard as a package. So some interesting stuff going on here. You know, Arc Flying Peak is nothing new. It's just the Vulpix part of the deck. Answers on a postcard if you think it's for anything more than Goodra and Mew players. But there you go. Speaking of which, there is a Mew that made it into the top 4. This is a Fusion Strike build of Mew, not playing any Path or Roxanne, just playing the one Marnie. Is playing Quad Phone though, so this is rub your hands together, gotta go fast. This is like I'm not missing Echo, I'm just drawing the stones basically, which is really cool to see. Not playing any catchers, just trying to get that Echo as viciously and as consistently as possible, which is really cool. Very streamlined on the support account, so you don't have much clog whatsoever, and you're cherry picking the whole time with Rotom Phones. Very turbo, very speedy build of Mew. Gotta go fast, am I right? Let's see another Lugia. This one's playing Snorlax, so again, like a nod to control, a nod to like Lost Box as well in some regards, can be a decent option. This one's not playing Raikou, and it's also not playing Dunsparce, so a few different choices in this deck list. It's playing Burnett, which I always kind of like half question, but it's playing some interesting choices in terms of special energy. I feel like Gift is like last in line among many of these special energy, and I don't really see a compelling reason to play a Gift in here either. Like, I thought that if you're playing things like Echoing Horn, that's when Gift goes up the list in terms of value and actually trying to make a combination happen where you have Horn Boss or other plays like that. But no, Gift Energy just being a card in the deck list. I suppose this deck is slightly more catered towards colorless attacking Mons, so that may be a reason for it. But is incorporating the Wash Water that we've seen become quite popular. So that's kind of cool to see. And the Irida package as well. There's just a lot of variety of supports in this deck list. And I'm still always going to question the Burnett. But there you go. We have a Vikavolt also making it into the top 8. And this is a Palkia Vikavolt as well. It's not something we've seen for a little while. Just a 1/1 Palkia V-Star in the deck list, and actually has a Sky Seal Stone. This is something I'm actually really interested in trying out. The obvious upside is that against Mew, you can win into attacks quite easily when you're playing cross switches. You can make that happen pretty consistently, where the Drapion takes 4 and then a Raikou takes 2 or a Palkia takes 2. Even just with Melanie attached, you don't obviously need to Star Portal the Palkia, you can just get there with attachments. And then you have the Vikavolt part that's going to try and disrupt the Lost Box and Reggie players and whatnot. So, yeah, we've seen this combination before. It's cool to see the Palkia coming in and joining, but also really nice to see the Sky Seal Stone doing bits. Have another Mew in the top 8. This time it's Judge Path. It seems like every time there's a Mew that does well for one camp, if it's going to be the Fusion or the DT, the other one is also up there with it. So it's still just that sort of shrug. It seems to be down to preference more than anything else. This list is still doing well. Very high Forest Seal Stone count with the 3 copies. So really just want to see that as early as possible and not miss a beat. Surprising to see no Oricorio in this list. It's often a really nice just sponge that you can throw into to try and make that more awkward prize map in some instances. But especially against Lost Box, where you're giving them 1 less energy requirement for a Rayquaza to blow up one of your guys. So that's a surprising choice, but outside of that, relatively straightforward list. Not playing Silene, not playing Palpad. Quite light on terms of like cloggy cards, which is, I guess, something you like to see. But playing no Lost City is an interesting choice. It seems to have been a staple for a long time. This time, though, just playing one Collapse doesn't feel like it's going to do enough against Regis when you don't play Silene. So that's a small thing there. We have a Goo in top 8. This is double Drapion. No prisoners. Cannot be bothered to face another Mew, I suppose. It's really rare that you see double Drapion and it feel correct, but this person's saying, I will not lose to Mew today. Playing a 2-3 line of the Goo, which is always something you sometimes see with some Lost Zone engines, which is kind of nice. It's actually incorporating Path of the Peak as well as Temple, so giving you a variety of options to try and slow down Lugia is kind of interesting, and you have the Parasol and Belts, so there's actually a lot of choices going on here. Not playing the Zigzagoon, just playing Belts instead to allow you to roll for the 230 and give yourself aggressive boss plays. Kind of interesting to see how the Goodra has adapted recently. I suppose in open deck lists, people have to respect things like Belt, and then they have to play like their board state just differently otherwise. But there you go. And then we end up on a Lugia. Pretty much ended how we started. This is like a very bog standard Lugia. It seems like vacuums are way more popular than any stadium at the moment. I do think there are some risks to this because Vikavolt that plays Paths can have a really good time against you because you just play the vacuums and then Bull Search to find your one pump, so you really need to just draw into Pumpkaboo, and it's like, shrug, how does that happen? So it wouldn't surprise me if some Vikavolt were slightly having an edge into Lugias right now, just with their Copium item lock plus Path. But the one Vikavolt that we have seen do well wasn't playing Path, so maybe that's an evolution that could happen in the next coming days. But this seems to be very similar, a slightly less amount of Lugia in this one, bit of an uptick in Mew, but still less than the combined total of the Lost Boxes. Surprising to see Rayquaza be less popular than Bog Lost Box, or these could be Kyogre Lost Boxes or other Zard or Gate builds in general, but not too different to the meta that we saw previously. Again, a slight uptick in Palkia in this flight. But in general, yeah, looking pretty good. So that's our first look at the first 2 late night tournaments that happened last Tuesday. And yeah, I'm going to try and do this weekly. I think it's important to have a grip on the online meta when there are high stakes. And yeah, I've enjoyed watching the streams. I did watch the European bracket as it played out. And yeah, I think it's great content and something really good for the community. So let me know your thoughts down below. Are you going to start joining these late nights because of the chance of a free trip to Japan? I think that's pretty spicy. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.